All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening. All right, good crowd. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our first State of Our Youth event. My name is Beth Swanson. I am the CEO of A Better Chicago, the city's only venture philanthropy. Our model is simple. We raise and pool money and then invest that capital in the city's youth. We find, fund, and support highly effective youth-serving organizations that support children from cradle to career, and our goal is to help put children on a path out of poverty to a family-sustaining wage. 2025 marks our 15th anniversary, and since our founding, we have deployed more than $83 million and now serve close to 60,000 young people annually. So today, we are here to focus on the state of Chicago youth. The city is home to a rich cultural landscape made up of 77 neighborhoods, each with its own identity, history, and sense of community. Our young people are exposed to tremendous opportunities across our great city, but we cannot ignore the fact that for far too many youth, these opportunities remain out of reach, especially those from Black and brown communities on the south and west sides of Chicago. Chicago, like many other major cities, continues to experience uneven investment and development across neighborhoods, resulting in inadequate access to essential services and disparities in economic, education, and health outcomes. A global pandemic made those challenges even more apparent, and now many young Chicagoans are navigating a climate where their education, safety, and well-being are always under threat. This context provides an important foundation for interpreting the findings presented in our State of Our Youth report, which will officially be released tomorrow. The report provides a holistic snapshot of how the city's youth are faring. So to create this report, we relied on our Youth Opportunity Dashboard, or I'll call it YOD for short, which pulls data from publicly available sources to track youth outcomes. The YOD is a very comprehensive tool that allows leaders across the city to understand how youth are doing at the community level. It tracks over 31 indicators, including access to high-quality childcare, math and reading proficiency, high school graduation rates, youth homelessness, youth employment, and more. So not only can you see this data for our 77 communities, but new this year, you can now overlay that data with the elected school board districts, which has become a phenomenal tool just not only for everyday Chicagoans, but the elected school board members as well. And before going on, I just want to thank Crown Family Philanthropies, the Joyce Foundation, and Crankstart for supporting the creation and implementation of this tool. We are so grateful for your partnership and the work. And I want to thank my small but mighty team at Better Chicago, who was also doing registration at the time, and their data, registration, they do it all. But thank you for really leading this effort. It's an incredible resource for the city. In A Better Chicago, we know that numbers don't tell the whole story, so we've also incorporated our citywide youth surveys and focus groups into the report, which allow us to hear directly from young people and provides just a much more comprehensive story. So I'm going to share some key insights from the report and set the stage for our panel discussion, which will begin just in a few minutes. So for context, here are a few stats about who Chicago's youth are. Of the 2.7 million people who live in Chicago, 29% of the total population are under the age of 24. Out of all of Chicago's neighborhoods, Austin, on the city's west side, is home to the largest number of young people. Riverdale, on the city's far south side, has the highest percentage of youth, with 51% of their population comprised of young people. The majority of young people identify as being Latinx, and over 1/3 of children 5 and older live in households where a language other than English is spoken. Nearly 1 in 4 youth, 0 to 18, live in poverty. And for Chicago's youngest residents under the age of 5, that figure is 43.3%. The poverty rate is as high as 90% in some communities. So we want to start there with poverty. So there's a clear correlation between poverty and academic outcomes. Children exposed to poverty in the first 5 years of life, a critical time for brain development, enter kindergarten far behind children not experiencing poverty. Food insecurity and weakened health often create difficulty for children to focus and learn, and young students living in poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to be chronically absent from school. Further, poverty and homelessness are inextricably linked, creating daunting social, emotional, and academic obstacles. In 2024, in every region of Chicago, youth homelessness was above where it was pre-pandemic. Many young people in Chicago are also facing the harsh reality of violence in their communities. Homicides are down across the city, which is promising, but even with that good news, the fact remains that there were 573 murders in Chicago last year. 93 of those deaths were people under the age of 20. It's simply devastating. Nearly 2/3 of the respondents in our youth survey said they've witnessed community violence in some form, and almost 1 in 4 say they witness violence weekly. So I want to repeat that. Almost 1 in 4 youth said they witness violence weekly. Youth who experience higher incidences of violent crime are in danger of long-term impacts to their mental health and cognitive development. And much like poverty, there's a direct correlation between exposure to violent crime and academic outcomes for youth. So the good news is that in the same survey, youth identified a clear strategy to help mitigate these challenges. Our young people are relying on community-based programs. They see these programs in organizations, nonprofits we fund and many fund in this audience, and who many lead in this audience, as a way to stay out of trouble and avoid becoming targets of violence. There is an overwhelming desire among youth of all ages and races to see an expansion of these programs, and they want more opportunities to engage after school, over the summer, and on weekends. These programs are equipping them with valuable life skills they believe schools aren't teaching, and they are calling for more programs that specifically offer job training skills, financial literacy, and social emotional supports. And that last one's really important. When it comes to mental health, we all know there is so much more work to be done. Mental health challenges are huge areas of concerns for the vast majority of our young people in our city who are dealing with depression, anxiety, and stress, and even more so for females and LGBTQ plus youth. 94% of youth surveyed said they or their peers are struggling emotionally, and they are all asking for more help. It's been exactly 5 years since the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted young people's lives and significantly altered their relationship with school. While we certainly have made some progress, the academic story remains really a complicated one. Third grade reading proficiency rates drastically declined during the pandemic and have yet to make meaningful rebounds, while 8th grade math proficiency rates also remain below pre-pandemic levels. For both indicators, the decline is even more apparent on the city's south and west sides. However, 8th grade reading proficiency is a bright spot in the data and has increased by nearly 50% since 2019. CPS has also recently recorded record high school graduation and college enrollment rates. And while there's still more work to be done to rebound from post-pandemic learning loss across the city, we should celebrate our students, our educators, and our school leaders for those promising gains. Our educational institutions continue to be central to our academic achievement and making it more important than ever that our young people are present and engaged with their learning environment. To that end, we cannot overlook chronic absenteeism, which has emerged as one of the most prevalent post-pandemic challenges for schools. So defined as a student missing 10% or more of the school year, chronic absenteeism is impacting the entire nation, and Chicago is not immune. In 2019, 24% of CPS students were chronically absent. In 2022, that number jumped to nearly 45%. And last year, it remained high at nearly 41%. So that's 41% of Chicago Public Schools students are missing almost 4 weeks or more of school during the year. So they are losing a month, at least, of learning. So we know that frequent absences, even in early grades, are a serious impediment to academic success, and children who live in poverty are especially at risk because their families and communities often don't have the resources to help catch them up. So now that we've had a snapshot of the current challenges our young people face, but with a few bright spots sprinkled in there to celebrate, the question really becomes, how best can we support them? Among the reasons that I continue to be so inspired by our work is this: 95% of respondents in our youth survey reported feeling optimistic about their future. They are hopeful about what comes next. This speaks to a remarkable resilience in our youth and the need for us, adults, institutions, policymakers, community leaders, all of us in this room, to invest more deeply in the potential of every young person in this city. No one person or organization or foundation has all the answers, and we certainly are aware of budget concerns and other constraints that make change difficult, but we do know where we can start. In order to holistically support youth development, there must be better coordination of existing resources and collaboration across sectors. And resources should be marshaled towards initiatives in the far south, near south, and west side communities that have faced systemic inequities for far too long. So big picture, we need increased investment in housing and food security. We know that stable housing and access to nutritious foods is just absolutely fundamental for young people to succeed in school and life. We all know this. We see this in our own homes, our own families. This needs to just be a given in this city. We need expanded access to mental health services. Initiatives that address trauma and prevent further harm are needed to help youth be engaged in their education and reduce the cycle of violence in our communities. We must support youth with the tools they need to thrive academically. It's essential we equip young people with the skills to overcome academic setbacks, enabling them to succeed in school and the workforce. We need to increase access to community-based programs, expanding after-school weekend and summer programming, particularly in underserved communities, providing young people with additional tools to stay healthy and engaged. And finally, we must address chronic absenteeism, and we are really committed to working to reverse that trend in Chicago. The data points just can't be ignored. We're getting towards half of the kids going to Chicago public schools are just not engaging in the way they should be in their learning. Our team has been working to understand this incredibly complex issue more deeply, and with a mission centered on creating better opportunities for youth in Chicago. A better Chicago will make a concerted effort to bend this trend over the next few years, and we look forward to working with many of you in this room as we further explore this issue in the coming months. So the challenges our youth face are significant, but they are absolutely not insurmountable. Just like our young people, I too am optimistic about their futures. And the collective wisdom and expertise in this room, representing so many different sectors, yet connected through a deep belief in Chicago's young people, it just truly gives me hope and optimism for what's to come. Together, we can build a better Chicago, one that reflects the best of our youth, diverse, hopeful, and full of promise. So to discuss all of this further, we're proud to welcome our panel of experts to the stage. We have Karen Foley, President and CEO of the Juvenile Protective Association, Raul Magdaleno, Principal of Kelly College Prep, Don McKoy, Executive Director of University of Chicago's To&Through Project, and Penny Smith, Executive Director of Policy and Leadership at the Erikson Institute. And the panel will be moderated by Sasha-Ann Simmons, the host of WBEZ midday show, Reset. And they're going to take this stage shortly. Please stick around also for, after the discussion, we have incredible performance by two young poets from the Young Chicago Authors. And again, thank you all for being here, and I will hand it to Sasha-Ann.
I would like to start off by just having each of you briefly talk about the most pressing challenges that you see for young people today in your view. I'm going to mix things up. Principal Magdaleno, I'll start with you. The most pressing challenges today.
So I often wonder about this question. This question is asked a lot, right? What is the most pressing challenge of our students? And I think we need to flip that question to it. What is the most pressing challenge that we as adults have to face in order to best support our students? I think that often we put a lot of pressure on our young people to try to figure things out. And over the years, I thought about this question a lot, and I think that the most pressing thing is this. We continue to use a 19th century model with 20th century strategies, trying to teach 21st century students. And that just doesn't work. So for me, the most pressing thing that we need to do as adults is try to figure out how to best support them and make the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind for you, Karen?
So many things. The first thing I would say is I love that that phrase, and we'll be using it a lot at JPA. I wish
It's
there was,
trademarked.
And that's right.
Okay, but we just talked upstairs about us doing some work together, so maybe we can work it out. The most important thing is the relationships that we're forming with children. Nothing else really matters at the end of the day. We all know this as children with our own parents. If we had good relationships, we know how beneficial that was. We know it if we have children. We know it with our friends. We know it with our colleagues. It's all about the relationships. To add to that, though, I would say that one of the concerns that I have, and our whole team has, and it was reflected in some recent research done, Empowering Your Voice, a study of 800 girls, is the role of social media. And I'm very, very concerned that as a society, we're not paying enough attention and doing enough. And if you have not read Sarah Wynne Williams' book called Casual People, Careless People, I suggest you read it. I just finished it. It's chilling. She worked at Facebook and was eventually fired for trying to do the right thing. And when you understand how social media scrapes data on our children and then targets ads to them, when you understand the force of social media, I think we all need to stand up and say that is not in the furtherance of good relationship building.
Penny, did she steal your answer? I saw you.
She did.
I saw this.
Karen.
As soon as she
Come
said,
on
so,
now.
as soon as Karen said social media, Penny's on the end like,
I
And
know, but I learned that at Erikson.
And it's not complicated to say because we all know
just give us your take.
challenge. But definitely, I second actually the relationship piece as well as the social media, because all of the pressures of growing pains that youth have to go through and is being compounded by, cancel culture and all the things that go on social media that I am so glad I didn't have to go through in my youth. And so it's difficult. And so when we talk about mental health, that's one of the things that comes up for me when I think about it.
Dominique?
And I have to go last?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What I will add on, I think I absolutely agree. I see it very similarly. I think this is sort of an adult challenge, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges facing our youth is that there is a lot going on, right? We all know that. We see it in the data. We see this in the news cycle every single day. And our kids are hyper aware, right? They have access to information in ways that most of us in this room did not have, right? They've been through things like figuring out how to do school through a computer in ways that a lot of us have never experienced that. And fundamentally, this is a different city, even for folks that are from here, right? The city hasn't changed in profound ways than the last time a lot of us in this room went to school. And so I think one of those biggest challenges for our young people is I think in a lot of ways, we just don't get it. And I say that not as a criticism for us. I say that as, I think that's okay. Maybe we're just not gonna get it. There's limits to how deeply we can understand our students' experience. The positive piece of that I think I see in this work, and I think some of the ways that I think we've responded to that, is doing more things like recognizing that qualitative data is data that matters, right? Listening to students, asking students about their experiences, building more spaces where we can, the emerging work of co-constructing, what does a classroom look like for you? What is the learning conditions that you need to be successful? I think we are seeing more of that work in response to that. And so, but I think making our peace with sometimes there's just pieces of this we're fundamentally not going to get, and we have to work in partnership with our young people to navigate these challenges that are new for all of us.
Right. In the last 5 years since the COVID pandemic, we've had a lot of discussion amongst ourselves, certainly on my show on WBEZ, about how COVID has just made things worse, right? I think we've all seen it, we've felt it. If we're parents, we've seen it happen to our kids. But keeping you in the hot seat.
Great, I get to go first.
How would you say the pandemic has exacerbated not just trends, maybe new trends, but trends that were always there there were just lingering underneath the surface?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think this is, we've talked a lot about this, right? This pandemic, the crisis was new, right? But it exposed the way that crisis played out across our city was along some really familiar patterns, right? We know that for community areas that don't have easy access to healthcare systems, saw higher rates of sickness. We saw death in different ways, right? Folks, when jobs were cut, right, that impacted different communities in different ways. And I think that played out in some of our academic outcomes. When kind of midway through the pandemic, we did some work to take a look to try to get ourselves a barometer, what is happening. Our work particularly looks at the lens of milestones on the pathway to college success for CPS students. And we did some work to take a look at what's happening to college enrollment rates, college persistence rates. And it was mixed news, right? But I think something familiar, we actually saw in some ways our 4-year college enrollment rates held pretty steady, and in some ways ticked up a bit, which is something we were really excited to see. That was a really different story for our 2-year college enrollment. And that was reflective of national trends. But I think when we start to unpack why is that the case, right, we have to keep in mind the context of institutions like city colleges that are so important. Like, who is the population that traditionally city colleges is serving, right? These are students that are coming from community areas, right, that were impacted in the most dramatic ways by the pandemic. Jobs were cut, families were sick, housing was affected, right? Those are all things that make it really hard to go to school. That makes it really hard to prioritize your education, right? And we know that these are not a reflections of students' interests oftentimes when we dig into that qualitative data, or their wants or their goals, right? But really a reflection of the larger things that they are experiencing that, again, makes making progress through their education really, really hard. And I think, again, I think these are things that we know that I think continue to need to figure out ways that we can build supports around to make sure that's not the case, right?
What have you noticed since the pandemic years, Karen?
Well, what I've noticed is we talk about them as if they're in the past, and that's not true. I think the pandemic has just morphed into a new phase. And so we are now doing a really interesting pilot program with National Louis University with the help of ABC, because the faculty and the college success coaches are really struggling to meet the needs of students for all the reasons Dominique talked about. And these are the same kids who did not receive that developmentally appropriate socialization during the pandemic. And we can't just pretend, close the door and say it didn't happen, it did. I'd love to talk to Onel and Chanel about the data about chronic absenteeism, because my hypothesis is that it's largely driven or also driven by kids that were out of school. And they lost all of that important socialization. So I think we should come up with some new language, and this is so complex, it will take a long time to wash out of the system. And what we don't want is we don't want to wash the kids out with it.
Penny, I'm going to run through a couple of the stats that we had on screen earlier when Beth was on stage. 43.5% of Chicago's youth between the ages of 0 to 5 live in poverty. So in some communities, that number is as high as 90% of kids poor.
Right.
Part of your work focuses on how systems are at play here and how they, sort of make this happen. So I want you to say more on that, on the systemic factors, and tell us maybe the kinds of interventions that you believe could have the greatest impact early in a child's life.
Early, yes. So when children who are living in poverty are more prone, and I'm going to say the younger, I'm addressing 0 to 5, are more prone to experiencing hunger, malnutrition, substandard housing, and environmental toxins like lead poisoning, air, water quality issues, and the like. Those are basic human needs that those children need. And that has an impact on brain development. And those early years are the most important in brain development for children. So as they become youth, I know we're focused on youth today, we have to figure out how we start early along the way, and in making sure that those families have the basic human needs. So that's at a systems level. We call it finding the baby in our programs. We work with policymakers and leaders to, no matter what sector, because I saw in the presentation that Beth gave about sector collaboration. And that's important because no matter what the sector is, you have to find the baby in that. They're impacted in some way. And so we encourage you to, as you look at interventions, so you ask, what are some interventions that would be helpful? And I say, go to where the wisdom lies, and that lies with the communities that are actually experiencing it. So try to release that desire to be a savior, so to speak, to tell what communities need. Ask. The qualitative data that we talked about is important in addition to just this data that you see here. We gotta go beyond that and ask those questions, because Chicago is very diverse, and so that means different lived experiences, which means different barriers exist. So we have to have interventions that address those different barriers. So that's important to remember.
I'm so glad we have a principal on the panel, because I got to talk to you about this absenteeism thing that we keep dancing around. What are you doing at Kelly College Prep to work around this? Because it's happening everywhere, at virtually every school across the city. But as a principal, where do you begin? How do you get kids to come in to class?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, everybody here is sharing some of the struggles that we see. At Kelly, what we've done since the pandemic, one of the things that we did, we recognized right away that we were going to need additional counselors. At our school, we had 4 counselors. Post-pandemic, we're up to 8. And we hope to sustain that with all these potential budget cuts that are coming our way.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do, besides helping them socially, emotionally, we just ask them, co-construct. What do you need from us? It's that easy, right?
What do they say?
So we work really hard to ensure that our students are seen, heard, and valued. And then we co-construct, we ask them questions. What do you need from us? For me as the principal. So a couple of things that they want from me. One, they want student lounges. All right, put money aside for student lounges. Create student lounges. We want student representation in the decision making. All right, we created a student government. So every month, I meet with the student government. They have their concerns. They have staff concerns, right? And we address them, and we talk to them. Most recently, they've asked can we get a new lunchroom, right?
A new lunchroom.
A new lunchroom, right?
Do they want something bigger?
They want the bigger, new tables. So the little things that we work with our students with makes them want to come to school, right? We often think about the curriculum component of education. If the students could see themselves in the curriculum, they're more likely to come to school. And I don't know if that's true. I think it goes back to the relationship building. Can I go to school and have an adult that cares about me? Do I have an adult that's going to say hi to me even though I've been absent for 5 days? Right? So it's that human approach that we try to do in our building to best support our kids to ensure that they come to school.
You've been deliberately doing that at your school.
Correct.
That, you talked about making them, allowing them to see themselves in the curriculum. What changes would you say that you've seen in the students since you started demonstrating that type of initiative? Is it working?
I say it does, and I think my staff will agree with that. We used to have about 400 bilingual students in our program. Over the last couple of years, with the influx of newcomers, we're up to over 800. And in a week or so, they're planning a school-wide parade to showcase, their nationality, their culture, their pride. So in a sense, it is working, right? Because we teach our kids, at school, our motto is Kelly Pride: persistence, resilience, integrity, determination, and empathy. And they're demonstrating those things. They're consistently advocating for themselves. They're consistently fighting for more resources within the school and outside of the school. So we do see it.
Yeah.
We do see it.
I'm going to have you pick up on that, Dominique, just that connection between absenteeism and academic outcomes.
Yeah. Man, I love hearing, and again, this is one example of great work that is happening, but again, this is fundamentally the right orientation I firmly believe we have to have, right? When I was hearing you talk, with the things the students are asking for, right? It's space that feels like their own, right? It's a sense of agency. It's voice in the building they have to come into.
Can we get better tables?
Yeah, right. It seems like
eat our lunch.
But
it seems so simple.
Yeah, but there's something behind that, right? It's ownership. It's being able to buy in, to feel like this is a part of something that is ours, right? And I think fundamentally, the main problem, the why we are concerned about chronic absenteeism, yes, it is time in classrooms, those pieces, but it is those relationships. And fundamentally, if you're not in school, Raul and his amazing team can't do their work, right? They don't have that opportunity to build those relationships, right? To make sure that students are feeling heard, they are feeling like they have an opportunity to really be a part of this community, and that there is something here at this school, right, that is there for them, that's going to help them achieve their goals, right? I think one of the big challenges just around chronic absenteeism has really been sticking with me. We've been doing some work in Philadelphia, and I was talking with a district team that's been really tasked with working on some of this work. I'm sure this is similar here in Chicago. But I think one thing that really stuck with me about that work is that you all can do all of that. Sometimes a young person still may not come to school. That could be really frustrating, right? Yeah. Kelly's gonna have the dopest lunchroom in the city of Chicago next year, right? Yeah. And there may be some young people that still don't come to school, right? And so I think it can be really frustrating, right? We are going to have to put in a ton of energy. We're gonna have to try different things, and it may not all work. And I think it's reflective of two things. One, making sure that we find ways to really manage that frustration so it doesn't turn into frustration with just frustration with families and just frustration with students, right? Because that comes from the district, trickles down to a school, they're frustrated with you all because still maybe not working the ways we want. That translates to families, that translates to students, and it's this reoccurring cycle of, this place is not for me. Yeah. Right? Maybe nobody asked me, the problem with the bus route that I take every day, that's the inconsistencies there, right? Right. And I think this is the second piece I think is just really important, right? Is this isn't just y'all's work, right? This is not just school problems. And I think this is incumbent on all of us, right? Again, all of these systemic things that are happening around our students trying to get their education, right? Those are absolutely also a part of the equation here. These are things that are getting in the way of our ability to smoothly navigate just getting to school every single day. And so I think finding ways to share that accountability, right? We can't just be pointing at attendance metrics every single day and say, keep trying stuff. I think this is a larger conversation for all of us too, of how do we make sure that you guys have the tools, students, families have the tools to also get there. Yeah, and I also want to, because this section of the conversation feels very middle school, high school. Yeah. Penny, what about the little ones, right? There are little ones also just as absent from the classroom. And so to me, it speaks to the structural challenges that their families are facing. That's right. Right? So what resources and support do families need here to keep our youngest Chicagoans in school? So I'll address the resources and then I'll talk about the support. As far as resources, again, I'll say you got to ask where the wisdom comes from, and that's the people that are experiencing that. It could be, just like was alluded to, it could be transportation issues, it could be availability, because I know in early childhood there's, childcare deserts, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe, parents can't find childcare, or can't afford it. Those types of things exist for them. So as far as resources, we got to look at the systems level and making sure we're investing in those communities, especially home-based care.
providers as well, because that's an economic development in the communities, as well as providing a service to the families. Now, as far as supports, I could be speaking out of not knowing much about the middle school and high school, but I wonder, because I work in adult learning, and in adult learning, it's all about having different types of learning models that you develop. So I wonder if, because we can get caught up a lot in what I call bean counting, which I know that we track absenteeism. We focus a lot on that because a lot of times, funding is dependent upon what those numbers are. But what if we look outside of that a little bit too and say, okay, so they couldn't make it because it's going to take us some time to fix the systems, right? So while we're working on fixing those issues, what are some supports that we can provide so that they're still getting the content, the educational content? Are we checking in on them in a way that doesn't seem threatening, like, they were absent again? Or are we checking in like, some challenges came up. Okay, here's some ways that you can access what you missed today, right? So how much effort are we putting into those supports in addition to figuring out the systems area?
Karen, I want to talk about mental health, because that was another piece in here too. And the scope of mental health issues among young people, that's something that's really hard to quantify in data. But in your work at the Juvenile Protective Association, talk about the main types of mental health challenges that you're seeing among young people. And something interesting that you've said is that the supports that are needed here are needed for the whole ecosystem. Yeah. So not just the kids, but the teachers, the administrators, in order for everyone to thrive. So let's hear more on that.
So I was taking a look at data because of that question. And we do a comprehensive trauma survey every year on every child. There's hundreds of children that are in individual therapy with us. And the number one ACE, or adverse childhood experience, is violence, kids being exposed to violence. And you heard Beth talk about this earlier. It's such a serious problem. And I was talking to a principal in Oak Elk Gardens, and we work in her school, and she said, it's just the norm that our kids could walk across a dead body and not even notice it. That was her comment. At the same time, I followed up with, well, what do you expect these kids' futures to look like? She said, sky's the limit. And what makes a difference there is the care that we're giving not only to the children, but to the adults who care for them. So more conversations with parents, more work with teachers. I was thinking a lot about how teachers and mental health professionals are like baseball and football players, and you can pick the team that you want to be on. But they play on a field, they wear uniforms, they wear helmets, and they throw balls around. But those games are fundamentally different. Mental health and teaching, education, are fundamentally different, and they can come together. But the expectation that teachers would understand mental health is not fair to teachers. They are under so much pressure themselves. So we're doing a lot of work with the help of ABC. We have teachers out there. Raise your hand. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do a lot of work with them with the help of ABC in a program called Connect to Kids. And here's what we found. When we work with teachers every week, whether it's individual consultation or in a group setting, we are hearing three themes from them. What's going on at home, because they're human beings. What's going on in the classroom with students, especially kids with very challenging behaviors. And then they're also hearing about all the pressures from administration. Not at Kelly, but everywhere else. And so what we found is teachers are often unaware of the role that they play in the behavior of children, in their mental health, standing behind a child or staring at them in a certain way.
So what would a trauma-informed approach
what would that look like?
Look like in real life, in the classroom, at home, in an after-school program?
Yeah. So what we do is we work with teachers. We meet with them. And this is they have to give up something to meet with us. Prep time, lunch, whatever it is. And we sit and we talk with them. It's not therapy, but I think it feels like therapy. And we're exploring what we call a reflective practice. Why did you have that reaction? Well, what do you think is going on for that child? And we're then in the classroom, so we're doing observations and we're doing it with a strength base. Hey, I noticed that you checked in with Beth over there, and that really helped her. She kind of regulated. That was a really nice thing for you to do. And sometimes there are other things that you're doing that are triggering kids and they don't even know it. So we see that kind of intervention, and it gets back to relationships. I'll just sum this up by saying, when you look at the work of Jack Schoenkoff at the Center for Developing Child, one of the programs that they're working on is how do you connect? And they had five tips, if you will. Let me see if I can do them from memory. Listen to children. We don't do enough of that. Collaborate with children, which is what I hear you doing. Celebrate their success. Beth was up here celebrating successes. Inspire them, and then provide comfort. If we do those 5 things every day, kids will feel and function better, and so will the adults.
Principal Magdaleno, I mean, despite some gains, there's still a long way to go when it comes to middle school math and early reading. What kind of support do students and educators need most to close those particular gaps?
I want to piggyback to a response where our teachers are under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of stress, there's a lot of expectations, and what they're lacking is that support to be that trauma-informed educator that we need them to be. Unfortunately, oftentimes, we don't get that preparation in the School of Education when we come out. Speaking as a high school teacher, because I believe that K to 6, they're real teachers because they know how to teach reading, they know how to teach math, they know how to teach. 6 through 12, we're content specialists. They teach us content. Oh, I could teach social studies, right? But to teach a kid how to read at a high school or teach them math is difficult. Yeah. So it starts with support. How do we talk to schools of education to better support our teachers in their education programs? That's one. 2, compassion fatigue is real. It is real. And I'm tasked with that. I also suffer with compassion fatigue.
What does that feel like?
It's a combination of feeling burnt out, not wanting to do anything, no longer having the will to help students, no longer having the will to say hi to a student, because we've done it all. We've tried it, and it's still not working out. So we need to take a step back and understand that sometimes what we do is not going to be successful. We're humans, and we like to, right? We want to get it right all the time.
Yeah.
And quite often when we don't get it right, we don't spend enough time to reflect on what went well and what didn't. So for me, the 2 biggest things that we can do to support our teachers is partnering up with agencies here who have a better expertise on addressing trauma, because we've had trauma-informed professional development once 3 years ago.
Oh boy.
And no follow-up. So then here I come, put the pressure, why aren't you doing this, and this to best support kids? And then I have to take a step back and recognize, well, we haven't provided a support for our staff.
We can help you with that.
Yeah.
There we go.
I want to say this to you as well, Raul. I feel you on the compassion fatigue, and I wish we were having this conversation a few weeks ago. So a couple of weeks ago, I participated in a career week at a high school here in Chicago, and just you go in and you're excited and tell people about your jobs, and hope that they get excited. They want to be a journalist too, maybe. Man. Let me tell you, I left that school, which shall remain unnamed.
It wasn't Kelly.
I went and met, it wasn't Kelly. I went and met my fiance at a bar. we were so, because he also participated, we were so deflated after seeing what we saw in the classroom. I was stunned. I'm a mom of 2 teens. I have 2 high schoolers myself. But I wasn't ready for that level of just, it was just a lack of engagement. Like, they did not care at all. They knew it was coming. They signed up for my workshop. It wasn't a surprise. You checked the box that said arts and entertainment. I came in, but like I wasn't like the latest TikTok star
Right.
or Ariana Grande or, you know. So they were highly disappointed. But my point being, just that there wasn't even a sense of, okay, well, let me get it together. This woman is here taking time out of her day to give us a presentation. Let me get it together. Let me at least listen. Let me maybe seem engaged. They were getting up, leaving, braiding hair, doing all kinds of things. And the teacher just kept trying to dance across the classroom and get people to listen. And turn your head. Oh, she's talking. And it was just a constant. I said to myself, is this his every day? I know this doesn't happen at Kelly, but
You know what? For the most part, it is.
whew,
And this goes back to how poverty impacts brain development and how poverty impacts, right, the rest of our students' lives.
I was just so sad for them because I was like, if this is what they're giving me, and I know they're giving this to their day-to-day educators, what does this mean for their future?
So I want to share a little anecdote, which is, it's funny and it's not funny. When we do our teacher evaluation is called REACH. So we have to go in there, sit down and take notes. And the kids will sit there quietly and say, it's like, you're here to evaluate him, right? So they'll sit there, right? And that's the one time, I'm exaggerating, but it is, that's the life of a teacher. So that compassion fatigue does set in real quick. And I'm just gonna say it, as a district, we have not done a good enough job supporting administrators and teachers on how to best address compassion fatigue, ACE, poverty, trauma, and so forth.
Dominique, in the report was the fact that graduation and college enrollment rates are up overall, but Black male youth, they're still facing persistent barriers. What targeted strategies do you think are needed to support this group more effectively?
I think, like, I'm thinking a lot about, your reflection, right? And I think this reality that, I've been in classrooms like that. I've been in spaces, I've worked with young people like that. And I do think it can be disheartening. And there's this really interesting thing that's happening too, right? Where when the time comes, like, I would guess every kid in that room cares about their future, right? Like they are interested.
I hope so.
They do, I guarantee it.
Because there was a group of presenters, one more rant. At the end of career week, we were all, at the session, I think there were 6 of us that day, and we all kind of met in the lobby and, said goodbye to the administrators who invited us. And we were all just kind of looking at each other like, and we came from all over the place, the Metropolitan Reclamation Water District, and a firefighter, a chef, me.
And I think this does tie into your question too, right? It's like, for context too, right? And I think for folks, just to level set, I'm a data person, so I got to do this all over the place. We track college enrollment, college persistence, but also college completion, right? And one of the ways that we do that annually in collaboration with our colleagues at the consortium is that we run a projection every year that says, based off of current rates of attainment, what is the percentage of 9th graders entering CPS today that we would expect to have a college degree or certificate within the next 10 years, right? So giving them 4 years for high school graduation and 6 years for college completion, right? For context, that number, right? If we took 100 9th graders starting CPS today, based off of current rates, we'd expect 31 of them to have a college degree or certificate in the next 10 years. That's for all of CPS, right? When we look at that in this report, we also disaggregate this information because it's really important to understand who is that happening for in a city and district as complex and diverse as Chicago Public Schools, right? For Black young men, that projection is 12%, right? Now, that is hard to hear, but there's two things, or there's a lot of things. I'm gonna try to say two things because I'll be talking for 20 minutes. But one thing that I really like about this calculation that we do every year, right, is that if you're listening closely, I said this is a projection, right? This hasn't happened yet. And I think it's one of my favorite things about the conversation that we get to have with this report every year, right? Is we get to say, if nothing changes, this is what the result that we would expect, right? Encouragingly, we've been doing this long enough that we've actually been able to go back in time and take a look at those projections. And we started doing this in about 2012. We were able to go back and look at the high school class of 2012. The projection that year was 21%, right? And we were wrong. And I was so excited to be wrong. And we're not in the business of trying to be wrong publicly, but this was a good time to be wrong because we beat that projection.
Right.
And when you actually dig into the numbers of that, it is 1,000 more students that actually earned a college degree or certificate than we expected to. Now, getting back to your question, right? I think there's absolutely comparable, right? Thousands of students, right? So I think there's two things here. I've worked with young men. I started my career working with young men in the city of Chicago, right? I know for a fact that number, that projection is not a reflection of interest in their future, in interest in college, in their confidence in themselves, can be completely honest sometimes. Right? But, when I look at this work, I think fundamentally this is a conversation of trust, right? And I think sometimes when I'm in those rooms, I think there's a real question of does this world, this pathway that feels very unattainable to young people, does this feel possible? Right? Do they trust that in everything that they've experienced in their lives, not just in school, but in the city of Chicago, that oftentimes, we're being honest, is sending signals that this is not for you. Right. That being a journalist is not a pathway for you, right? It's really hard to believe that. It's really hard to say oh, this is something, and I think we really gotta be clear about the challenge, and I think respect the challenge of we are fundamentally trying to change a system that is not built for our kids, right?
But even when we put someone in front of them that looks like them?
Yep. And I think that is a piece of it.
I've been told that's exactly what we're supposed to do.
That is absolutely a piece of it. And I think, and I would beg you to please keep going, because honestly, as frustrating
so if they invite
as that,
me next year, I should say.
Please invite Sasha to come to your school. But one of my biggest lessons as an educator, right, is I've sat in rooms where I felt like nobody was paying attention to me, and I've ran into those same students 5, 10 years down the line, and they say, Mr. McKoy, you remember that one time when you talked about that? I'd be like, hell no, I didn't remember that. I was 22 and I was just saying something, but it stuck, right? And I do think part of getting back to the strategy, I think particularly for our young men, is we have to build back trust, right? They're not just having bad experiences in college, they're having bad experiences sometimes in high school, in elementary school, right? And I think trying to figure out ways, again, being responsive to what do you need? What are the things that are not really feeling like it's for you? And making sure that we can really try to instill some of that confidence that this is a pathway that is accessible, I do think is a really, really critical part of this work. Sorry, it was long.
But much needed.
They heard you.
Thank you for that.
They did.
I just want to help.
Please keep going, Sasha.
My business card on the desk.
Somebody, you'll be surprised.
Penny, what policy measures are moving the needle for young children and their families right now? What should we be focusing our attention on?
I think we need to be focusing on getting more money into families' pockets. So the Illinois child tax credit is important.
You say this as federal cuts are happening left
Absolutely,
and right.
But that means that we need to localize the support even more, right? So we can't rely on federal funding. So, that Illinois child tax was for up to $300, but it's not enough. We could do more. That's great, but can we do more? And there have been efforts by Chicago and Cook County with some of the federal funding from the pandemic that came through that they've been doing with the pilot programs, which is really great. And it's been shown in other states to be very successful. So I think we continue down that route, but also anything, like anything that puts more money
Yes.
into the family's pockets is going to be, you know, the right way to go. And again, localizing it. What can we do at the local level where these community-based organizations have the most information, you know, in the front lines, and getting that information from the communities and seeing what they need. Ask them, you know, what else can we do? So.
Yeah. Karen, we heard from Beth earlier, community-based programs like yours, like JPA, they have a really positive impact on young people. And in fact, they want more of them. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
I'm having mic issues today. So youth-centered programs doing really well, as in like youth, they want to do them, they want more of them. So talk about how schools and youth programs can work together to just kind of break that cycle of poverty, and especially in the most impacted communities. Let me leave it there.
Well, I want to start by assuring you that while people didn't pick up your business card and you didn't think that they were paying attention, they were. You made an impact. We see this all the time with young people. They actually care a lot about what adults do for them and think of them. One of the things that research is showing is that kids want to be listened to. They want to be validated. They want to be taken as serious people. They are. They know a lot, and we often don't take that into consideration. So all the programs that we're working with right now, some of them are dealing with homelessness, some of them are dealing with chronic absenteeism. We're working together. One of the things that we're doing at JPA is we're starting to pilot peer mental health supports. We think that there's no better way than to take the kids that are struggling and give them leadership roles, and to have them, this is not restorative justice, so we're not trying to amend harms. That's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is the things that we talked about: listening to each other, collaborating, providing comfort, those sorts of things. And I know it sounds like motherhood and apple pie. It's not so easy to do, to be present. And it's not easy to truly listen. And so these are skills that we need to, that all of us in the community organizations need to work on more, and we need to be listening to our educators and our leaders around the data.
Before I transition into some questions that we got from the audience before tonight's event, I want to kind of just have you briefly, just across the stage here, share what gives you hope and optimism. We heard it from Beth earlier. Despite all of this, the kids are optimistic. So let's be hopeful and optimistic as well about our young people. I'll start with you, Penny. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is one of the things that we start our leadership and policymaker programs with every single time is we ask the question, and how are the children? And it doesn't matter what work you're doing. If the children aren't well in your communities, then it's not enough. So that gives me hope that there are leaders out there dedicated to that, to making sure that the children are well, and that they're just what we heard, that they're optimistic. The youth are optimistic. So let's grab onto that, and let's also do that generation connection there with the relationships. We can do a better job of connecting more with them, the prior generations to this current generation. It's just, there's some disconnects that we could fix for sure. So
Love that.
gives me hope. Though.
Dominique?
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is the data, right? And I think I feel very thankful, particularly in this moment, to be in a city like Chicago, where we can still say the word equity, right? That we're working with a district that believes that this is the work that we need to do, not because it's just something that we believe, but because we're following our responsibility as educators, right? And our charge and the promises that we make to families, and that this is a strategic response, right? Equity-centered work is a strategic response to our duty as a system, right? The promises that we make, right? And so I'm very hopeful about that. I'm hopeful for a lot of the this community, right? Organizations in this room that are putting time, energy, talent, treasure into this work. And again, when you go back to the data, over time, it does not always feel it in the moment, but we are making progress. We are a district that has demonstrated a capacity for change that is resulting in real outcomes for Chicago public school students. And I think sometimes it is hard. This is such hard work that can get lost, but it's important for us to remember that this is fundamentally, right? Even all the challenges that we still face, this is fundamentally a different district that we have today than we had 10 years ago, than we had 15 years ago, than we had 20 years ago. And I think that inspires me to continue to think about how we can continue to improve this for our kids, right?
Principal Magdaleno.
Looking at this key insights, and our students are facing poverty, they're experiencing mental health crises at a staggering rate, community violence on a daily basis, they're chronically absent, some of them struggle to read and do math, and yet they're resilient.
Absolutely.
Yet they want to be doctors. They want to be lawyers, journalists. Some want to be teachers, right? So that resilience that they show day in, day out is what gives me hope.
Karen, what's giving you hope?
Quickly, 3 things. First of all, we know from the kids study that kindergarten kids who have social emotional capacities that are age appropriate are more likely to read at grade level by 3rd grade and also do math. And that tells us that investing in early mental health programs is important. 2, we're so fortunate that we have this understanding of brain plasticity. I learned, even people at my age have it, so that's a good thing. But young people have a lot of it, and that's the resilience part. And so investing in young people it works. That gives me a lot of hope. And of course, I see this every single day in the work that we do. And I'll just wrap it up thirdly with the intergenerational work that we're doing with our grandmother's circle, specifically focused on middle school girls. But I'll tell you this story. One of the grandmothers was meeting with middle school kids. This was apparently a tough crowd, not a little earlier, but they could have been in your room. And one of the questions was, how many grandchildren do you have? And the grandmother said, well, I have 5. And the girl said, no, you don't. You have 15. And she was counting the 10 girls in the room as well as the 5. I know. Kids have big hearts. Let's connect. That gives me hope.
Oh, that's a great story. So some questions here. Thank you to those who submitted questions ahead of time for us. I'm just going to run through a few here. Principal Magdaleno, I'm going to come to you first. This one says, we've heard deportation fears might be further impacting youth mental health or keeping the kids from attending school. Yes. With Kelly High School being majority Latinx, are you seeing these fears of ICE come to the surface?
I got to take a pause because on day one of the new administration, one of my parents came to the building and stated to me that earlier that morning, some individual stopped them, took the husband. It turns out that it was ICE, right? So as of today, it's about seven families who have been impacted. And that fear is lingering in the neighborhood.
And 7 families at your school alone?
Yes.
Wow.
Right? How many of them? Probably a little bit more, right? Some of them keep things private. So what we try to do is we try to do our best with our community partners, specifically with Bryant Park, organizing events, Know Your Rights, raising funds to help family members to pay for lawyers. So ICE is real, the impact is real, and that fear, we're seeing it throughout the building, especially in our seniors. I see my post-secondary coach here. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how a large percent of our students did not want to apply for FAFSA because they have to provide certain information.
Mm-hmm.
So
what do you tell them?
So I myself was undocumented. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I tell them my story. and I tell them that, you know, try to give them as much information so they can make an informed decision, because everybody has to make that decision whether they want to expose themselves or not. So we do the best that we can. We talk to the parents, we talk to the students. My post-secondary team does a tremendous job in speaking with them and getting agencies to support them. So unfortunately, the impact again is real, and we're seeing it throughout the building.
Penny, this one touches on something we were talking about earlier, but perhaps you can expand. Every day we are seeing news of more and more cuts to federal funding, federal funding streams that support youth programs in some way or another. What worries you most about the changes?
Well, that means that at the community, again, community-based organizations need help more than ever. What worries me is the impact that's going to have, of course, on children and families. And just yesterday, they just they fired everybody from the regional Head Start office here. And that's problematic. That's something that's going to have an immediate impact on families, and that worries me. And so again, we need to localize the support. We got to beef up all of that support at the local levels and make that normal. Like, you know, we shouldn't forget that. Even if, you know, the funding all of a sudden comes back, we have to continue to invest locally where we know where the needs exist and we know what they are from those families. So that's what worries me.
Dominique, how should we respond and organize when the data suggests a solution that's not budgeted for? This person says, we're all being asked to do more with less. I feel that. What can inspire some local hope in this moment of drastic cutbacks?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think there's always going to be more, right? I think something that we talk a lot about in our work with data, with schools and organizations, right, is there's kind of the conversation around it, you know, interesting versus important, right? And I think we're going to have some really tough conversations coming ahead to really get laser focused on like what is that important pieces that we really need to organize our supports around, particularly in constrained environments. And like, again, what I'm very thankful for is that we live in the city of Chicago, right? There is hundreds of organizations trying different things every single day. I think spaces like this to share what are the things that we are trying, continuing to make sure that we have opportunities to share resources, collaborate, I think is something that we're going to have to deeply push into. And then I think Penny, to your point in some ways too, how do we back our institutions that are most at threat of losing serious funding sources, right? And some of that may be with dollars from civic communities. Some of that may just be by helping them sharpen their arguments to prepare against the attacks that are coming, that have already started, right? It's not a matter of if, it's very clear that this work is under attack. And so I think figuring out more ways that we can support each other and feel affirmed in that pushback and defending that, I think is something we got to really dig into.
And letting them know that these resources exist, because that's a problem too. They don't know they exist. There's tons of resources that are out there, but how are we getting that information out? That's a problem too that we have to overcome.
Very important. I'm glad you brought that up, Penny. Leave us with this, Karen. In what ways do you, I'm thinking of that optimism again, right? The young people. In what ways do you see them driving change and shaping the future of this city? And how can we, all of us in this room, support them?
That's a fabulous question. We have two young people. We should ask them too. I think what young people are doing is stepping up and wanting to be heard, and it's incumbent on every one of us to provide more opportunities to hear them, for them to speak. And if we do that, they will, the great thing about people my age is we've got experience, we can help risk control, and the great thing about young people is they haven't done it yet, so they've got a million ideas about how something could be accomplished. So I'm very hopeful I'm concerned about the increase in mental health needs with all these cuts and everything that's going on. But I also believe that the kids will help lead the way.
The kids will be all right?
The children, we have to work to make sure the
It's our
children
responsibility,
are
yep.
okay.
It's our jobs.
It's our job.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to this fabulous panel. Thank you so much. Your perspectives are so valuable. You guys are great. Now for the part I'm most excited to share with you all, because we would be remiss to do a whole conversation about young people and not actually hear from them, right?
Right.
I'd be a little tone
That's
deaf.
right.
So please join me in welcoming two poets from the Young Chicago authors, Diana Gomez and Gabriel Vilus.
Hi, my name is Diana Gomez. I went to high school during the pandemic. I graduated in 2023. And recently I met up with, well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. But recently I met up with some people from my graduating class. I was brought here when I was 7 years old. I'm an immigrant from Mexico. And with the new administration, we were all kind of going through it with our mental health and just we just wanted to get together. And I had one of the most heartbreaking yet inspiring conversations. And just seeing where everyone is at stages of this was very interesting, seeing how some people are at my age bringing life into the world, at my age barely starting school, you know, doing so many different things. And one of the things that stood out that one of my friends said to me was, at the end of the day, I'm just a nomad, and I'm gonna go back to the place I came from, and I'm gonna continue and keep going to new places. And that word kind of really stuck with me. So I wrote this piece called A Love Letter from Us Nomads, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So, a prayer for the settlers. Someone who is satisfied with hate is the beneficiary of all pain. Who will take care of them in their one-sided adoration? May it not be too late for change. Amen. I'm not very religious, but let me pray my words will not fall on deaf ears. May my words be the silence on your drive home today. A love letter from us nomads, the kind whose heart isn't attached to no land. Give me a minute and I will tell you what no man has. That as a continent we will move, as an island we will lose. I can't rhyme, but I mean well. When I say I'm sorry, I don't mean I'm sorry for trying. I'm sorry to every immigrant kid, child, sitting at a Target today in this golden cage, being chased by opportunities, sitting at a table we were not invited to, a buffet we may not feast on. We must wait for leftovers from people who have no intention of dining, no thirst because they have known no drought. When ambition foams at your mouth, our frustration will drip sweat. I'm tired of explaining why humans should be viewed as what they are. That I don't have to be a doctor for you to understand that my mother loves me with the same love you love yours, that my father would cross rivers and deserts so that I could prosper, that I am a seed of sacrifice planting a promise. I promise that every child will grow. So I ask, no, I beg of you, stop cultivating all this hate. Let's leave a generation of clean slates. Let me remind you that the blood spilled will be red, not green, not blue. Let me remind you that every spark can burn a forest down. Let me remind you that every breath we take is from the same air. That you can't put a name on water. That you can't put tariffs on body bags. That while your voice is a political choice, ours is a child begging to be educated. It's a mother working doubles. It's an older sister with 3 jobs. We are the majority of America. No one leaves home because it was too good. Human nature is to chase survival. So while you sit at your dinner table with your loved ones discussing the price of your gas tank, remember my warning, and please don't say I didn't warn you. Thank you.
My name is Gabriel Vilus. I'm a senior at Francis Barker, and I would like to speak to you guys about the power of poetry. I think in its essence, poetry is transformation. It makes the simple complicated, or it can make the very simple complicated. And I also think that the teacher specifically, there is a very strong interest in using poetry to teach kids because they can use it to explain concepts that they may not feel ready or may not have the words yet to explore fully. I also think that it can explore very painful topics in a beautiful way, and that's what drew me to poetry in the first place. I moved to the US in 6th grade. I did not speak any English whatsoever, and so my favorite part of class would be when we were studying any sort of poetry, because it would break the rules, and that's what drew me to it first as well. I started doing poetry in 6th grade and really liked it, and my teacher encouraged me to do it, and this poem is the first one that I performed. And so it's kind of a full circle moment for me to perform it as a senior. I swim in a sea of restrictions. I've been dreaming of drowning lately. The thing is, there are people around me that manage to swim, but I cannot. And so I speak to them, asking for help, but they do not hear me since I speak French. So I try English and they understand me, but I sink faster with every word I speak. I know what this dream means, and I think I knew since 6th grade. The English language is so simple, but has so many rules. In English, where are you from is racist, Africa is a taboo word, and people of color is always pronounced as though the words and syllables were eggshells worn out to not walk on. When I speak English, I swim in a sea of restrictions. I can't say this word and they can't say that one, but despite that, microaggressions still happen, macro ones even more. What is the point of stopping people from saying slurs if they find 1,000 other ways to be racist? 1,000 other ways to say, you are not like us. We do not want you here. In English, coup de foudre turns into love at first sight, which I do not like the sound of and sounds fake. In English, retrouvailles turns into nothing, because in America, people do not return to each other. They grab guns and shoot the other one up, but still you will not help me swim if I do not speak English. You don't want me to speak French, you want me to speak English and only know French, so that you can use me as a circus clown, tell me, oh, you know French? Say something. Yet, in middle school, I tell you my name is Gabriel, you tell me, no, that's a girl's name, Gabriel. I hate English, but I speak it because I need to swim. I need friends, I need an A in Miss Gibson's English class, but now everyone asks, say something in French. No one did when it was the only language I spoke. In America, if you speak English in another language, you're cool. If you only speak another language, you are other. But another language has to be something European, like French or Spanish or Albanian, but you're not cool if it's Creole, Chinese, or Malayalam. I want to keep speaking French and keep sinking to the bottom, because then at least I'll speak my native tongue. But still, I must swim.
Thank you so much. I have chills. Diana and Gabriel, thank you. Thank you for being here and ending us in that powerful way. Just a huge thanks to everyone for being here, for all that you do for this city, your belief in our young people, and your partnership going forward in this work. Please mingle a bit more, enjoy one another, and I just, again, thanks so much for being here tonight.